Ask the Podcast Coach for November 28th, 2020.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music that means it's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I am Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com. I was looking for the banner there. And if you have a question, come on and join us at askthepodcastcoach.com/join. That's one way you can jump in. You can also go to askthepodcastcoach.com/live and jump into the chat room. And if you're listening to this after November 28th, feel free to go to askthepodcastcoach.com/ask and leave a question, and we answer your questions live. It's not just me. It's me and the guy right over there, the one and only Jim Cullison from theaverageguy.tv. How's it going, Jim?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. Good to see you, and welcome almost to December.
It's
almost
crazy, isn't
made it to the final month of the year. Happy Thanksgiving to those here in the United States, and we're thankful for all of you as well. You know, what I'm really thankful for is coffee. You know what comes along with coffee?
Oh, man. Oh, wait, I jumped ahead. And actually, you're free. Nope, we're good. All right.
No, I'm just really still because I'm staring at my coffee.
That's it. Well, what we want to talk about here is it's brought to you, The Morning Pour is brought to you by podcastbranding.co. And look, I've been talking about Mark and his awesome, if you want artwork, if you want a logo, if you want a full-blown website, everything is there. You can go over to podcastbranding.co. But what I thought I would do today to do something different is go over to his website and okay, we've heard what Dave has to say about Mark. What about other people? Well, Sean from the podcast Consider, If You Will, says Podcast Branding is a great company to work with. Mark helped provide a vision for the artwork that clearly grasps the character of my show, which is what I've been saying all along. He works with you one-on-one. Dr. Nicole Byers said from The Bold Life, says Podcast Branding made creating the cover artwork for my new podcast so easy. Mark was fast at making changes when I had suggestions, and even when my suggestions were vague, he seemed to know what I was thinking. Crystal Payne from the creatively named The Crystal Payne Show said, I wasn't sure what I wanted, and I'm so happy I found Podcast Branding. Mark was so fantastic to work with. He captured the exact look I was hoping for my podcast cover artwork, and it makes me so happy every time I see it. So if you're looking for artwork, if you're looking for a logo, if you're looking for a website, the place you want to go, of course, is podcastbranding.co. And when you go over there, tell them that Dave and Jim sent you.
Cappuccino, hold the phone.
People are going to start associating that with podcast branding. For all our non-American friends, hope you had a great Thursday. Jim, have you bought any cool kind of Black Friday stuff or anything?
I have actually bought a few things this year. One, we talk about this all the time, but backup for podcasters, backup is important. And I use a program called Acronis to do that. And they had a Black Friday deal. LastPass is doing some, if you need some help with your passwords and you're not using a password database like LastPass, they have a pretty good deal going on. I've been trying to, Daniel's done a nice job of sending the emails. If you haven't signed up for those, and so can you just sign up for the emails, or do you have to be, because it's like podcasting deals, right?
Isn't it podcastingdeals.com? I think so.
I think so.
I think that's all it is that's like a special email list. Yeah, podcasting deals, gear, app services, and more podcasting resources. So yeah, according to his website, podcastingdeals.com, mixers, microphone software, mobile apps, audio accessories, cameras, recording, lighting, and much, much more. Yeah. Deals handpicked by award-winning expert podcaster Daniel J. Lewis. And
I did have before we move on from that, I did have my UPS. So I recommend that all podcasters have a battery backup on your PC.
Yeah.
Even if you have a laptop, I mean, probably not as important because a laptop's kind of got a built-in battery in it. But for keeping your networking gear, I mean, nothing's worse than like if we were doing a live stream like this and it's not a full power outage that gets you. It's that blip right? It's where the power drops for a second. Okay, I think they call that a brownout, right? Where it dips for a second and comes back. And so I think podcasters should have both a UPS for their networking gear. So like your modem, your router, those kinds of things so that the network stuff runs on. Small little one. In fact, here in the United States, Office Depot is running a little tiny one for like $35. So they don't have to be terribly expensive. Then I have a bigger one that I use kind of for all the PCs that are here. And I had it fail the other day. I went in and checked the batteries are going bad. So I had to I'm going to be replacing those batteries for about $30. But it does. I mean, I shut down 3 of my computers shut down, and you're like, oh, I would hate for that to have happened during Ask the Podcast Coach. You just disappear. So that's something right now. I think if you're as a podcaster, I always recommend backup. I recommend making sure your taxes are in order. And I also recommend putting a UPS on your gear, because you just never know. You never know when you're going to have a brownout.
Well, yeah, I made the mistake. I made my own brownout. I found out that you can't have the space heater on while you turn on your hairdryer. And all of a sudden it was like poof. And I came in and my computer was off. Like the monitors were still on because they're on a different, what
circuit.
Are those things called? Yeah.
Different circuit. Yeah.
Well, they were on a different, what's that thing called? A power supply? It's a power level.
UPS?
Yeah, it's on a different UPS. I have a bunch of them in here.
Okay, good.
So some of them, the batteries are good.
Yeah.
The ones that the monitors are, but I actually went back and double checked. I'm like, wait, is the computer plugged into? So I don't know how hard it is to take one apart, and
not very hard, actually. Yeah. If it's not holding its power, it's usually 2 screws or something, and the battery comes out. Just take it to your local battery store or order a replacement at your place of choice, wherever you want to do that. Slide it back in, and you're back in business.
Yeah. Here's a fun game. What do all these things have in common? 1Password, Acorns, Adobe Spark, Anchor, Autodesk, Capital, Gazette, Coinbase, DataCamp, GetAround, Glassdoor, Flickr, iRobot, the Philadelphia Inquirer, Pocket, Radiolab, Roku, RSS Podcasting, Tampa Bay Times Vonage, and the list goes on. Yeah, Jim. Wait, one more. The Washington Post and WNYC. Want to guess?
They all went down when Amazon went down.
Yeah, Amazon went down this week. I kind of got some flack because I just saw that Anchor went down at 9:45, and because I needed to make a video to show somebody how to leave Anchor, so I went into my fake Anchor account and I saw they were down. I just went out to Facebook and was like, "Hey, I guess you get what you pay for." And I got flack for that because they're like, "Oh, look at the Libsyn guy," and I was like, "Wait, no, that was not a Libsyn thing. It was a Dave Jackson thing." So
Libsyn host their own. Is it they have their own hardware, or how does that
we
work?
Have a ton of we have multiple.
Yeah.
It's like if one thing starts to happen, and I've seen, let's see, I've been there 5 years. I think one time we had a thing where one of our whatever server thingies, that's my technical term for it, was just getting a little slow. And we're like, all right, hold on. We just flipped a switch and went over and figured out what was going on and then flipped it back. And, but yeah, the one that freaked me out is I use and.co for my accounting, and I logged in and nothing was there. And I was like, because it is close to the end of the year. You start thinking about taxes. And I was like, where's my stuff? And they went, and I went to Twitter and I said, are you guys part of AWS? And they're like, we're really, really sorry. But oh man, that was the one that made me, the sphincter kind of just a little tighter on that one. I was
I told you in pre-show, I think the internet or like having a provider like Amazon is much like the utility, and you've got to treat it like a utility. All those companies that you identified are single threaded on Amazon.
Yeah.
And that's not good, just to be honest, to be 100% honest. Yeah. They need to be, probably going to both Amazon and Azure. And I know that's hard, but if you really want to protect yourself and be fully right, or they probably were on one region. So they've only purchased one region of cloud backup and not have multiple regions with redundant failover. But that's hard, by the way. It's really hard, and it's a little more expensive.
Yeah, it is.
So they're probably single. That's not good. Like if that's your company and it went down because it's using the cloud, that shouldn't happen. That's the reason they use the cloud.
Yeah,
right. So
that's my whole thing. It's like, okay, one of the things I was using with down, my whole thing was kind of like, okay, that was funny. Now, what steps are you taking to make sure that doesn't happen again?
Right.
That was, I mean, early, we're talking 2004 days of Libsyn. They had a speed bump. And what was really cool is they came out and said, hey, that was our fault. And here's what we've done. So that'll never happen again. That's actually one of the things that was like my first things that I was like, oh, I like this company, because they weren't like, oh, it wasn't us. They were like, nope, that was us. Sorry. Yeah. That's back when the Daves were running it. So,
well, hey, listen, if it doesn't matter who hosts you, if you're down, it's your fault. Like there's plenty of ways to stay up at this point. And so for companies who want to, immediately go, well, it was Amazon's fault. No, it's not Amazon's fault. It's your fault that you chose. And in this case, like I said, maybe it's not totally Amazon's fault in the sense that if you are on one instance in one region and that region happens to go down, like, hey, you should be in multiple regions. Like that's why we do what we do with this, so it is their fault.
Yeah.
It's definitely their fault.
Well, I was trying to come up with a transition, but I don't have one. So
just make it.
I have a situation I thought you would be a good person to ask, because I know you deal with strength coaches and identifying people's weaknesses and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I have a guy, and I'm going to keep him. I'm not going to get too detailed here, but I have a person at the School of Podcasting, super nice guy. And when I say this person has everything, they have a gear, they have a website, they have a name. According to the person, they have plenty of topics. And I go, so what are you missing? And he goes, well, I need an intro for the podcast. I'm like, okay, cool. And I put him at the door of an intro maker type person. And I said, you know what your first episode is going to be about? Yep. And I go, what? I said, the only thing else I see that he has artwork. I go, great. I go, do you have kind of a description for your show? And he's like, no. And I'm like, great. And he goes, what I need though? He goes, what I need is an accountability partner. Is anybody at the School of Podcasting that would be my accountability partner? And I'm like, yeah, his name's Dave Jackson. I go, what do you need? He goes, all right, let's identify what we need. I said, well, let's your intro, and we need your description. I'm like, let's start off with the easy one, the description. And so I'm like, hey, it's Friday. By Monday, that gives you 2.5 days to come up with 2 sentences about your show. And he missed the deadline. And I emailed him on Tuesday and said, hey, you're late. And I'm like, nudging him. So how do you, like he said, I want to count. So, and I think he's kind of a tough love kind of guy, where they like, no, I want you to hammer me. This is what I need. And I was like, part of me wants to go, well, it's the holidays. And I'm like, no, he's,
I say, just bring the hammer down, Dave. Just bring the hammer down. Well, there's some kind of fear there, right?
That's it.
I think asking some questions like, why can't you just give me 2 sentences? Like, what is stop? Let's do it right now. I'm going to sit here and you're going to type or whatever. I mean, it sounds like, cranking out 2 sentences. I might even just crank it out for him and, charge him for it. And say, here it is. Is this good enough?
That's not a bad idea. Say, here's this, and then you fix what's wrong with it.
Because it sounds like there's some kind of fear stuck. Like it just gets you stuck, and no matter what your intention is or how much accountability. I've got one of those kinds of things going on for me right now, where I just don't want to do it. Yeah, I'd rather get a root canal than this thing. And so I think it's just a fear bit. You might help them by just writing 2 sample sentences for them. You could probably, you're good at this.
Yeah.
Crank something out. Or you could say, do you want to pay me to write this for you? Like, I'll just do it, but you'll pay me.
Yeah. Miss Eileen has a great point. She says, ask him for StreamYard is acting weird this morning. Here we go. Ask him.
They're on Amazon.
Are they? Ask him for the list of topics.
Yep.
That would be a good one. Carrie says, my coach gets me asking what's holding me back or what I'm feelings come up when I'm about doing this. If it's because I'm stuck, she helps untangle the noodles. I think the big one, and this is one where, because this kind of came out in, I do group coaching at the School of Podcasting, and we're all kind of like saying the same thing. Because I think when you launch a podcast, you think about everyone listening. And I'm like, here's the good news, bad news. The good news is everyone's not listening. In fact, when you first start out, maybe 20 people are going to be listening. And that's if you count the cousins, and things like that. And so I said, so nobody is listening. I said, so don't worry about that. You're going to get better as you go along. I said, in fact, why don't you just record a couple things right now, send them to me, and, just like a musician, let's do a little practice and see how it's working and go up that. But Carrie's got another great point, break it into bite-sized chunks. And the other thing that I need to really do is Jim Harold says he doesn't want to do it, and he's finding the reasons not to do it. You can always, I think that's Oprah said that, although probably somebody before Oprah said it. You can always find a reason to not do it. But I need to ask him to define his why. Like, what's your why? Because when the why is greater than the fear of whatever, then you'll actually take action.
Yeah, well, I find for me, like, I'm a better editor than I am an originator sometimes. And so we get to these, like, I know what I want to do. I just know how to get started. And if I just start with something else, like if I just get somebody else's work, or I copy off something and make it my own. We were launching a new podcast at Gallup here at the beginning of the year, and I needed some content. I sat down with my co-host. We just recorded a bunch of stuff, and then I threw it into Otter. And then I grabbed that out of Otter and just modified what she said to make the intro out of, she has this beautiful way of just saying these things. Then I threw it over to my editor and I said, hey, can you would you make this make sense in sentences? Because, the spoken word and the written word aren't always the same thing. Right. And so it was just sometimes sit down. If you're having trouble writing, sit down and talk and then get that transcribed. And okay, now I've got some things to work from. Crunch that down into 2 or 3 sentences and call it good. And you can always change it.
That's another one I should bring up to him.
Yeah,
you can always change it.
Because this isn't going to be permanent.
Because I know I did a presentation on this for DC Podcast, and at the time I went to my description and it was horrible. It was just because really all it needs to be is, who is this for? Because if you think about it, you have to put yourself in the shoes of the potential listener, and they're coming to it going, is this for me? So when you say, if you're a blah, 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 this show helps the such and such person, blah, blah, blah. We talk about this. So at this point they go, oh, that's me. Oh, and I like those topics. Good. So that's really the bare bones of what it is who is this for and what can I expect? And that's Doug says the hardest part is narrowing the focus. Yeah. I mean, in reality, the school of podcasting is pretty wide. And I have a problem with that because sometimes I do like, today we're going to talk about how to start your podcast. And all the other people are like, what? Been podcasting for 3 years. And then other times I'm like, today we're going to talk about how to, use a compressor on a blood. And people are like, what? So it's hard to do that. So, what are you going to do? I think
you should create a Mad Libs for this, where it's just, okay, give me a noun, give me a verb, give me 2 adjectives.
That's it.
Right. And then have kind of a standard template. You just kind of punch it in and it kicks it out for you.
Yeah.
The intro, that's one of the things I feel like I've done right with the podcasts is a written standard intro that I do for the show. And they're different for each show. Sometimes I remake them kind of dependent upon which show I'm going into, or I modify them a little bit, but kind of having that base to work from and then modifying it from there has been very, very helpful. And so whether it's Home Gadget Geeks or Cyber Frontiers or Call the Coach, Theme Thursday, they all have a different but similar intro that I do in the beginning of the show. That helps me get into the show. Like that helps me get in and get going, and especially because I'm 100% live, so it's live to the hard drive and there's no going back, and we're not going to make a lot of edits on this thing. That kind of keeps me rolling. It also gives me confidence when I'm starting the podcast that I'm going to at least nail the intro right. I'm going to get that. We do the same thing here on Ask the Podcast Coach. You have a very similar intro. You change it up from time to time, kind of based on things that you want to do. But I love having that. I think you could probably build an intro and a description paragraph out of the same material, the same raw material. Should be the same, very, very similar. You don't have to be reading it, but should be very, very same. So if you get that core of things, maybe Dave, maybe just sit down with him. Don't tell him this. Maybe you should record him talking about it then
Yeah.
transcribe that and give him the raw content. Now make something out of this, you know.
Yeah. Coach Dave says I've changed mine several times. So it gets better as listeners interact. And that's a cool thing. If you have somebody that listens to your show, ask them, how would you describe it? Because I had somebody, if I have a show called the Podcast Rodeo Show where I grab somebody's show, I've never listened to it. I hit play and I just talk over it. And somebody said, "Oh my God, you're the Mystery Science Theater of podcasting." And I went, I'm like, not sure how many people know that show, but the people that are my age probably do. And I was like, that's a pretty cool way of describing that show. And that's one of those where if you like Mystery Science Theater, you'd probably like this podcast. So that's sometimes when I did that once where I took a bunch of descriptions from people that had left reviews in Apple, and that kind of helped, but it also became this weird creative project that I think that was the one. And in the end, I looked at it, I'm like, that's horrible. It's like, it was all about me instead of what's in it for them. It was like, Dave's the best thing since sliced bread. I'm like, yeah, but like, what does he talk about?
Yeah.
So that's no good. John says the toughest part for me is that all my podcast ideas are all around the world of music, and it's tough trying to do a music podcast. It's pretty much impossible to do a music podcast without being able to use music from the big name artist, unless, of course, you do it on Spotify, which isn't really a podcast, and the only people that can hear it are people on Spotify Premium.
Yeah,
yada yada.
You could drive an audience to that.
That's something I want to try in 2021.
Yeah.
It probably won't last long, but I just want to go through the paces to see exactly what that is.
I don't know. John, to John's point, I think you have to think differently. Like, okay, so how do I do a music podcast and don't? I think I think of the music as a crutch, just to be 100% honest. Like, you playing the music on your podcast to try and talk about it is a little bit of a crutch. Like, be creative in some ways that allow you to talk about it without having to bring it on. Listen, your audience can listen to it. Like, especially, here's some opportunities to drive some people to that music to be able to be able to listen to it, or create a new way to do it where they're interacting with you. Now go listen to this and come back or whatever. Right. I could see how that could be a problem, but it could also be an opportunity for you to do something completely different in that area.
Yeah. I had a great thought.
Oh, sorry.
The minute I started to talk, I was just like, and we're out of here. And I was like, what? It'll come back to me. Gary has a great point. This, again, Jim pointed this out. There are many ways to start your show. I'm a big fan of welcome to the show where we blank. Today, we're going to talk about blank, but there is this way. Gary says, I like Seth Godin's podcast. He starts each one with a short story before saying, hey, it's Seth, and this is Akimbo. It's like the story hooks you right away. Yeah. My buddy George Hrobb, who does the Geologic podcast, starts off with a story. It's got to be a good story, though. It's got to, you got to grab them and hook them quick. Because if it's just like, hey, I talked to my friend yesterday and boy, he's crazy. I don't know. It was, and like, okay, well, let's come on, keep it going and then do that. But I think Saturday Night Live does that. They have a cold open and then they do the intro. So
in John's case, Dave, I wonder if it'd be smarter to do, instead of trying to lean on the music, lean on interview, not live interviews, but other things. Like if bands have done interviews and you can get copies of those, or you can do that, or interview musicians in there. I think maybe you could do that and not have to, that kind of stuff isn't necessarily copyrighted. That's not the right word, but copy protected, whatever.
That was my point. I'm glad you said that.
Good.
If you want to get people back to your website, that would be a way to do it. Do a music show. Think about it. Back to the behind the music, or no, not that. It was on VH1, Storytellers. And, there'd be a guy going, well, my dog died and, mama got drunk and dad was in jail. So I decided to write a song about it, and then you're like, okay, I'm dying to hear this song now. And that's when they would play it. And then the song would have more meaning because you knew what inspired it. So if you talk about, this is one of the songs that really, when I was a teenager, really felt me in like, for me, I could go, there's a song with a slightly, one of those titles, you know what I mean? From Ted Nugent called Wang Dang sweet moontang, we'll say.
Yeah.
But the solo part of it is like orchestral. Like I could do a class on why this is a good guitar solo, and somebody be like, well, I want to hear that guitar solo now. Because Dave said it starts off small with a flanger, and then he brings in the rhythm guitar, and then at this point, the drummer goes to the ride cymbal. The way it builds, somebody'd want to hear that song. So that might be a way to do that. The fun part is with a music show is you got to be doing it for the love of music, because how do you monetize that? Maybe you can, because you're going to make a dime. I once sold a song off of Apple iTunes, and I made a dime. Of course, they're only charging $1, so that's 10%. That's actually not a bad commission rate. But if you're doing it just for the love of music, absolutely. But otherwise, because then you get into like bonus content. I don't know. That would be an interesting one. So,
can you use covers in that scenario? Like, okay, let's just think about this practically for a second. If you're doing a podcast, it's audio only. You're not running it through YouTube. You don't necessarily have, well, not all the platforms are checking, or running algorithms against it. If you're using a cover that somebody else has done,
right?
I mean, it's on you. Can you use covers?
No,
no.
Because here's why.
Okay,
it's the day of weird song titles. The song "Sugar Walls" by Sheena Easton. Wow, am I dating myself? Because at the time I just remember thinking, what is this? What is written by Prince? So that's a cover. Well, actually, if somebody else did that, so let's say, I don't know, Christina Aguilera decides to do the cover.
Well,
That's
okay,
hilarious.
but what if an obscure person does a cover? Like not
Right. Well, it's
not,
still, that song was written by Prince.
yeah.
And so you've got to have.
How do they get away with that on YouTube? How do all these covers get away with it on YouTube?
I honestly don't know, to be honest. I was like, oh, what? Because, I'm with you on that. No, what might of it be? It's not downloadable. That's the thing that always shoots podcasts.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. I don't use music in my podcast at all. I mean, I do, but it's original. Yeah. It's a riff that I had somebody write for me. So it's a completely different thing. But
if you do buy, because there are places to, and I'm really kind of upset about this. I was using audio blocks. And remember when we 2 weeks ago did a thing about Howard Niggle and Dime to Death? I went in and canceled my audio blocks because it was going to be like $150 a year. And I was like, and I can spend just about that at Envato Market or something like that. And I get Audio Jungle and like everything else on their website. And I was like, well, I'm going to do that because I don't really use that much music, but it's got themes and images and blah, blah, stock photos and blah, blah. I'm like, I'm going to do that. And Audio Blocks went and charged me again. And I emailed them and I said, hey, I know I stopped this like 2 weeks ago. But the tricky part with music, if you're going to do that, keep your receipt because you never know. This show has been flagged on YouTube for the intro music. Mm-hmm. And I have the CD and a receipt. So if somebody says, hey, what is this song? I can say, well, this is off the, I think, Power Funk CD or something like that I bought. I bought it from audiodogs.com many moons ago. And, so I'm able to say, here's my receipt. And here's the thing. Here's where I bought it. And this is royalty-free music. So please go pound salt. Mm-hmm. But I would definitely, I have a email from the band King's X saying, yes, you can play our song on your podcast. Because you just never know. So
mine's never gotten flagged.
Yeah,
not for that. We've played other things, or I've had TV or football show up in my podcast before and gotten flagged for that. I've never had, and nothing for the audio. It's always been, YouTube probably does the best job of actually reviewing this stuff. I've never had anybody come back to me on the audio side of things to flag it, but
yeah.
YouTube, definitely, they're the most stringent.
Yeah, Gary says there's a service called Lickd, Lickd, because, E's are evil, that allows for people, for popular music to be used. I'm going to call BS on that. Or I'll have to look it up. But the reason I say that, I know Doug from Podcast Music, has been working on this for the better part of probably 5 years. And they just got, for me, because I'm not into, I got to watch my verbiage here, Latina music. Am I saying the wrong thing? It's of a Spanish / Mexican flavor, lots of maracas and, kind of thing. And there's apparently that band is popular and they've gone to podcast music, but they made it so hard. I feel like on one hand, kudos to Doug for getting a band to come on, but you have to buy a license for like a year. And I'm like, well, what happens after the year's over? Like, I have to go back it's one of those where I was like, oh, they took a step, but I'm like, and on one hand, I want to go like support this effort, but it's like one song. I was like, So I just know they've been trying and
Licked. It looks like Licked LICKD.co is the site. Real artist, real music, claims free for YouTube. So right, this is a YouTube specific and that makes sense, right? I mean, this is the hard part about the crossover between podcasting and YouTubers. Yeah. Is in this area of music. This is where it gets really, really dicey.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where the whole Yeah. If I say right now, hey, welcome to the podcast, and people watch this on YouTube, they think a YouTube is a podcast, and
it's one of the few spaces where the crossover doesn't work. Like, you kind of go, oh yeah, in both ways, by the way. There's things you can do. This is a great example. I can make this on YouTube. And then if I try to export the audio out and make a podcast out of it, now I'm if I've used this music, I'm out of compliance with it. Could you get away with it? Probably easier to go from YouTube to podcasting and get away with it. Although I think we're going to start seeing a lot more like the Audibles and the Spotifys. Check for that stuff, right? Because they have every good reason to. Right. So I think in year 2021, we'll probably see a lot more of that. So probably easier to go from YouTube to a podcast than to go from a podcast into YouTube. So that has a lot of trippy, and that's not really what I meant to say. That sounded like I took something, but there's lots of trip hazards, let's put it that way, in getting into YouTube with your podcast content. So those don't cross over. We get that question a lot, right, in the group.
Yeah.
Can I take my audio and just load it to Facebook or load it to YouTube? Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And then, and Banks brings up a point. He goes, you're using King's X. If they sell their rights, now somebody else, it's like,
you could. That's debatable in court, right? That's what we have courts for. So you could.
Yeah. The good
news would you
is,
want to? Like for you have that embedded in so many school of podcasting.
Yeah.
Right?
That would be fun.
If say that happened to you, let's just hypothetically say that happened to you. Would you go to court and fight it, or would you? That'd be a tough call, right?
Oh man. Well, the good news is I have all the files. Like I can easily go in, he said, but realize taking 10 minutes an episode to export it with new music and then replace it, it would just take a while. Yeah. And anytime you go to court, you're setting yourself up to yeah.
Well, it's just work. I mean, it's just expensive. You know what is not bad though is more coffee. And
more coffee.
I think we probably have some folks who support you on a regular basis.
We do. And not only that, he said, let me there we go. Screen 2 is now going to be shared. Yay. That's what I'm looking for. We haven't done this in a while. It's fun. It's exciting. That's right. We've got a new, it's not new. And why do I have, that's really loud. I'm trying to figure out why I have podcast branding at the bottom of this. I did not turn that on. That's weird. See, it's fine. Podcast branding is at the bottom of that. But the one and only Patrick Keller actually went from one tier to a higher tier as a supporter. So when you jump on and you're new, you get a big shout out. And if you're new and if you're not new and you've gone from I think in this case, I think Patrick went from 5 to 10. So thank you for that, Patrick. We deeply appreciate that. And so if you're like, well, who is Patrick Keller? He does the big seance. So if you like spooky stuff, that is the kind of stuff for that. You can find it at bigseance.com. In fact, the actual description is Patrick Keller of bigseance.com invites you to join an open discussion on all things paranormal, but specifically topics like ghosts and hauntings and paranormal research, spirit communication, psychics and mediums, and life after death. The candles are already lit, so come on in and join the seance at bigseance.com. So thank you, Patrick, for that. And I did find out, if you use, I would love to know why I have on the next slide, I somehow have a podcast branding in my bottom right-hand corner, and I have no idea how I did that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it is in there.
I'm like, I don't know what's going on.
It has to be in the overlay somewhere. You've got it in the overlay.
Is that it? Let me see here. Logo.
I would think somewhere in there.
Background, video clips. Oh, let's do. Yes, I do actually. Let me turn that off because I was like, where did that come from? What?
There you go.
But yeah, so also this is now open if you are looking for some discounted. If you're looking for a Black Friday deal on one-on-one consulting, go over to it's patreon.com/Dave Jackson, and you'll see that one of the tiers there is for one-on-one consulting at a discounted rate. But we do want to thank our regular peeps who give us $20 a month. And that is awesome people like Kim at Toastmasters101.net. If you want to develop your voice, reduce your editing time, and improve your content, well, you want Toastmasters, and you can find her at Toastmasters101.net. Max Trescott over at aviationnewstalk.com. Get your aviation on. Indie Drop-In, where they connect listeners with amazing independent creators. All the shows are 100% creator submitted. Check it out, indiedropin.com. Glenn the Geek. Had he had a surgery last week?
I don't know.
Yeah, but he's had a surgery. He should be
on
hopefully. Yeah, he's he took a shot of Thanksgiving. He goes, this is Thanksgiving in Florida, and of course in Ohio we're almost freezing to death, and he's got this beautiful sun and the horse out in the pasture. It's like, oh, it's so cool. But check out Glenn if you like horses, horseradionetwork.com. Ed Sullivan, if you need some audio editing done, it's like butter for your ears, soniccupcake.com. Shane at spybrary.com. So if you want to get your James Bond on, or what's another famous spy? Is there another famous spy? I'm trying to think of that.
I'm sure there are. I can't.
Yeah.
I can't think of one.
Mr. Bean, maybe. I don't know. Michael.
No, I don't think he was a spy.
No, Michael Delaney at Baby Mountain Radio Productions.
Bourne. What's his name? Jason Bourne.
Jason Bourne, or what's the guy? Oh, Behave. Austin Powers.
Oh, Austin Powers. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
I don't wonder if Shane is talking about Austin Powers. I'm thinking maybe not. But if you're looking for where podcasting and hard work are made fun, go over to babymountainradio.com. Greg over at debtshepherd.com. So if you want to get your finances in line for 2021, he teaches financial wellness at debtshepherd.com. And if you'd like to be an awesome supporter, go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. You can see more people over there. And one of the things I will say is if you're using Patreon, make sure you whitelist, I guess, their emails, because I happened to go and they came up with yet again a new interface to where you can view your patrons. And I said, oh, I want to make sure that I have all the $10 people on the website. And I said, filter active $10 people. And all of a sudden I was like, wait, that's like half the people I think I have. It's like, it turns out there have been many people I've been promoting that haven't been a supporter for some time now. So,
well, better than the other way around though. Right. better not to be, because then they're like,
yeah, hey, what's going on? Yeah.
Always better to overtip. Always better to over recognize. So,
yes. So the man from Uncle. Did that guy even have a name, or was he just the man from Uncle? And where is Uncle? I've never been to Uncle. Matahari. There we go. So
the Pink Panther.
There you go. What was it? Inspector Clouseau.
Yeah.
I want the hamburger.
Probably not.
Probably
not a spy. Not a spy. I don't think he was a spy.
No, he was just more a private detective, I guess.
Steve Martin in Pink Panther, the best Pink Panther. Like,
you're gonna have people hunting you down.
I think so.
What's that guy's name? Yeah. Oh man, because he's dead. I can't believe I can't remember who did Pink Panther. Because I'm with you. I think of Steve Martin now.
Yeah.
The chat room. It's the guy with the black hair.
Right. Yeah. It'll come here.
He did like 5 movies. Oh, that's going to drive me nuts. Well, anyway,
I love the Steve Martin ones. Now, the stuff around it, especially in the second one, was a little sketchy. But Peter Sellers is who
Peter Sellers. Thank you.
Who we're thinking about. Yeah, I enjoy the Steve Martin ones the best. Those are my favorite.
Yeah. Here's a fun question. I came up with a bumper sticker today. That's always fun because Ryan had asked in a Facebook group, when creating a podcast, what is the most important aspect to invest in first? Example, sound quality with mics, promotion, editing software. And so what would you say to that?
Read those again. What are the
he said, which I thought it was interesting, sound quality with mics, promotion, or editing software.
I think when you're starting, I think getting the sound as good as you can in the very beginning is really, really important. The other stuff will come, right? You got to get that. I think you got to get that. You're looking at me like you disagree with me. Do you disagree?
I do.
Okay. Yeah. What do you think?
Here's my bumper sticker.
Yeah.
Buy $100 microphone.
Yeah.
And spend 100 hours on determining who your audience is.
Yeah.
It's my bumper sticker.
Well, was content one of the options?
That's no. That's what was funny is because he said that, and we're all like, dude, like you're focused on all the wrong stuff. And that's why I thought it was an interesting question, because he's like, oh, do I start promoting it? Do I use what software do I use? It was all the how and none of the who. And we're like, right. You gotta
that makes sense.
Squeaking the who part there.
But once you have your stuff, like enough people don't care enough about the sound quality.
Yeah.
You have to kind of. Last night, Sammy, my daughter, was on Home Gadget Geeks, and we've been doing this annual after Thanksgiving kind of Home Gadget Geeks with her. This was second annual, and I had her on my headset. I have a Jabra that I use for work. And I just wasn't that happy with it. I was like, oh, okay, I need to set her up a mic. I've got an extra 2100.
Right.
I need to get an arm. We're going to do when she gets home this summer, we're going to launch her podcast. And I was just like, I need to get her an arm and a mic and a good audio, good audio device of some kind. So.
Well, what was interesting is I saw the inverse. I was just listening to a show, The Good Grief something podcast. It'll be on the Podcast Rodeo show, I think next week. And what was interesting, it was the inverse of what I normally see. And that was the beginning started, and it was the woman, I forget her name, but anyway, she's British. So number one, she sounds great already. She hasn't said anything, and she just sounds, phenomenal. And so it's, welcome to the Grief Show. And it's like seriously produced. It's got this great backup music and a great intro of like, here's what we talk about, because it's like topics that we don't talk about, but we should. So it was all about how to handle grief and things like that. And then she starts the show, does a great job of introducing her guest. And when they get to the actual interview part, she went from like a 10 to like a 7, which 7 is still pretty good, but it was noticeably like, wow, your audio took a definite step back. And usually I see the opposite. You record your intro when you're first starting out, and so it sounds horrible because you don't know how, you don't have any mic technique and things like that. And then when you start the show, you come in and all of a sudden like you got really good. And I'm always like, you need to go back and fix the intro. So, but I'm with you on that. It was just one of those things that I said, if I wasn't listening through the ears of a podcaster, I probably wouldn't notice that. And I said, are you using a Yeti and are you recording through Zoom? And she goes, I am recording through Zoom, but she was using, I forget what different microphone. She was actually in her closet. She was taking steps to get good audio, but I'm with you. Sound quality is something that can definitely, I hear people all the time that just, and you can't control your guests. That's the other thing that just kills you.
No. Yeah. You can minimize the damage, but you can't. You're going to get what you're going to get. I think people automatically discount the guest's sound. So if the host is good and the guest is bad, to a point, can't be too bad, but if the guest is just at least audible, I mean, you can even have a guest on a listenable telephone, like an old analog line, right? And as long as you can hear what they're saying, people discount that and they're fine with it for the most part. They kind of accept it. I think radio got us used to that, just to be honest. But when the guest is bad and the host is bad, I'm pretty quick to be like, All right, I'm moving on. I can't. I'm not going to give an hour of this to my ears. I just can't do it.
Yeah. Coach Dave says, hey, the message, the audience, and content are critical, and people won't listen long if it's not delivered via clean, leveled audio. Yeah. If I always tell people, if you make your audience grab the volume knob, they're going to grab the volume number once, and then the second time they have to grab it, they're going to hit skip or whatever. So yeah. Kim says AM call-in radio shows. Yeah, that's me. The reason when I used to be when I heard the phrase blog talk radio, I was like, oh no, because those used to be, two people on the phone.
Yeah.
Now I'll kind of listen. Is the host on, because you can use blog talk radio just as a host. Why, I don't know you would do that, but okay. But if it's a host on a mic and then the guest is on a phone, I might tolerate that, but it's one of those things where it's like, not sure. So.
Well, and Stefan asked a great question in the chat room. Says, "What is good? Like, what does that mean? When is it good?" And go ahead.
I'll give you a great example. I was listening to Mark Maron interview Michael J. Fox. I'm a huge Michael J. Fox fan. If you haven't read any of his books, dude has the best attitude of anybody on the planet. And Mark Maron is Mark Maron, right? So he's on his microphone. Hey, Michael, it's good to hear you, buddy. What's going on? All right. Hey, everybody. And then Michael J. Fox is using a built-in mic on his laptop, I'm assuming. He did have headphones on, which he said, like halfway through, he said Parkinson's and headphones don't work because he somehow knocked them off. But he was, his microphone's way back here. I'm in the shower. I can completely, and I've got a speaker right here, but I've got the sound of the shower on my head. Mark is going completely through, hearing perfectly. Michael J. Fox sounds like this. Can't understand because it takes you in music. They call it being up in the mix, meaning it's front and center and it's there. But the minute you add reverb to that, even though the volume is exactly the same, it starts to sound like they're back here. So that's one thing. I always say when the sound of the audio distracts you from what they're saying to how it sounds, that's when it's a problem. I don't know. Jim, do you have any examples?
Well, I think of the old Art Bell shows, and his guests were never in studios. They were always coming from crazy locations. But for whatever reason, arts engineers would, and I don't know how they did this, but they must have run those telephone calls through processors or something. And they'd always be in the mid-range where we speak, and it would take everything else out. And so not a lot of bass, a lot of mids, maybe some highs. And they were almost always very, very clear. Like, even though it didn't sound great, you could understand. And like you said, it sounded like the sound was up front, not way in the back. And so that's, I think, the sound that you're looking for. Again, if it's you, the host, that has that sound, I think people have less tolerance. If it's you and the co-host, and you have a regular co-host, by the way, I think this is an exception. If your regular co-host always sounds like crap, or the quality isn't as good, I think that's going to be a strike against you as well.
And then I sound like this. Can you hear the reverb, or is that just in my headphones?
I think it's just in yours.
Bummer.
Yeah,
right.
It's not making its way through.
I was in a giant coliseum.
Yeah, well, but if every week I came in and sounded like I was on a telephone, that would be. I think that would cause listener fatigue. But if we had somebody jump in here and be on a telephone, the audience forgives it. They're like, okay, this is just one time, and this is cool. Right. So I think it's kind of key, if you're going to do that, process it in some way that, and you just can't, like in Michael J. Fox's case, it is what it is. Like, you just can't, you're going to have to make a decision to listen to it or not to listen to it, or listen to it in a different environment if you really like the interview.
Well, and the hard part of that is, Michael has Parkinson's, so he's already, he can't act anymore. He said, because he can't remember lines, and he has, some effect. It's affecting his speech now.
Oh yeah.
And so it's a case where if I go in and try to deverb him, it's going to add some artifacts, depending. I mean, it would just be such a balancing act to find, how can I remove the reverb and not negatively affect the clarity of that. And that's just I was like, well, and it is one of those things where once I got out of the shower, it was better. But that was just one where I was like, this is a good example of why a laptop microphone is not good. Because I mean, I could hear him. I just couldn't understand what he was saying. And it wasn't because I couldn't understand. It was just, it just wasn't in my face like the other one. Steven says, for radio stations, there are special devices for calling which have audio processing built in. They pop up once in a while on eBay. Yep, for an ISDN. These days, you can get that with, because even if somebody on an ISDN is, 4 feet away from their microphone, they're still going to sound like crap. But that's where a Squadcast or a Zencaster or something like that.
You're digital now when you're calling in on these, and so sometimes, depending on the connection, like I've done some calls, and the audio is amazing. You're like, iPhone to iPhone, get the right connection. Holy cow! Now I don't talk on the phone a lot anymore, but when I do, and I get one of those calls, I'm like, man, this sounds like I'm right there. Yeah. So I don't think it's as much of a problem anymore as it used to be.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point. Because if you can get somebody, like, let's say I'm using I will hold one up, the new Zoom PodTrack P4. I could have them connect on Skype and have that through this, and they would sound great. I just try to avoid the phone line, because the phone line cuts out bass and treble, and that's why everybody sounds like this on the phone. That's just something. Craig has a great point. He goes, we often speak about audio quality being a distraction, but rarely about crutch words and verbal tics. I disagree. I think we talk about crutch words all the time. Like these two kind of seem to come up together when we talk about them, the right and and ums and ahs. I think we give it equal billing here as we do to poor audio. Craig, I'm not saying I'm not trying to disagree with you just to disagree, but I do think that comes up a lot as well. I was surprised. I did an episode of something, probably best podcasting gear. I went back, that show, I did that in 2016. Wow, was that outdated? So I had to redo a lot of my episodes, and I realized how often I go, the lip smack. Yeah, I tick too. Because I know some people, like, if you leave that in, it's like nails on a chalkboard. So, you never know. Doug said, Zoom meetings that have been recorded and almost everyone is on their computer mic is awful. Yeah. But in theory, I mean, I get that, but that's the sad thing. If I turn around and try to make that a podcast, that's a problem. But most of the time it's just a meeting or whatever. So we just recorded, some tips, some helpful tips for internal work at Gallup. And I was surprised. We actually got 7 of the 10 to be on a headset. So just 3. And it was the 3 that were the senior leaders who I was in one of them. I said, hey, you got a headset? And he was like, nope. And I could tell just from his answer, it was a battle. Like, not only no, but you're not going to make me wear one of those things. And I was like, dude, I know you have good hair, but put the freaking headset on. Like, don't, we're recording the video, but like, get a headset. Do you know how bad you sound? And it was, I really struggle with that. Cause I'm like, I know those things make you uncomfortable, and I don't know why. I don't know why they make you uncomfortable. They make you sound a million times better. Yeah. But he had that same 8 miles away thing going on, and you're like, "What are you doing?" And but I could tell from the answer, he was like, "Nope," and I'm like, "I'm not going to win this battle." Yeah, that's okay. When you're like, "Okay, well then." Yeah. He's like, "Do I sound bad?" Then. He was like, "Do I sound bad?" And I'm like, "Of course you sound bad." Like, what? And he's like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Yes. Yeah. You sound awful. My ears are bleeding from your audio at the moment." "Oh, it's not that bad." "Okay, it's not. Then we're fine. All your peers are going to watch this." "Okay, we'll do it. We'll do it. It's your brand. It's only your brand." Yeah, but man, the fight. This is Dave. This goes back to the conversation we had at the beginning of the show. There's a fear of that headset. Yeah. That just drives them. They're just not going to do it. It's like wearing masks. They're not going to do it. You're like, well, okay. Gary says, I told our VP of sales we should invest in a good headset and a webcam for our account executives. Yeah. So many webinars with bad sound and video. Yeah. I watched a Cronus do
a webcast big. They promoted it big, and they were all of them. Well, the host was on one of those pucks, and you're like, oh my God. The second I heard it, I was like, seriously, guys? Now they cut over to the subject matter expert, and he was on a headset, and it got clear and it was fine. But I was like, serious? Like nobody checked this thing, put a freaking headset on.
Yeah, there's a difference between can I hear you and do I sound good?
Exactly.
Can I hear you? Yes.
Yeah, one of my best friends at work has this puck that someone has told him is good. And they're like, it's awful. Every time he comes on, I'm like, hold on, I got to wipe the blood out of my ears. And, he's like, it's not that bad. I'm like, it's bad.
Yeah,
it is bad. So
I think that's what people are going, well, you can hear me. Well, yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, different. It's different, especially when it's gotten so like we're so dependent on this now. We're so dependent on this form right now. Like, no, I need you close to a microphone. Please help me.
Yeah. John has a thing. He says, should that be one of the questions in a pre-interview? Do you have a headset mic or a mic that isn't your build? Yeah, absolutely. What I do too is I say, can you send me a link where you've been interviewed before so I can hear how you sound? That right there kind of says, hey, guess what? Sound matters here, kids. And, we're not going to take it. So, did you happen to watch, I sent out a thing on YouTube about the world's worst interview form.
No, I haven't watched that one.
I had to record it twice. The first time I was really getting it. Well, my favorite was because they said what it was. Well, first of all, it was your name and then like what kind of business do you have? And I'm like, well, like shouldn't you know that? And what I'm going to do, because I thought about this later, I need to have two forms. One for people that I asked to be on the show and one for people who asked to come on my show. But at one point it was, would you like to spend $250 so we will share it with my email list? And I'm like, shouldn't you be sharing it with your email list anyway? I thought that was interesting. And it was like, if you don't rate and review the show, you may not be a guest. That was another one. And I was like, stop it with the ratings and reviews. And do you commit to sharing the interview? And I said, what if you suck as an interviewer? I'm not sharing that with my group. What if you ask me the same 5 questions that the last guy did? I'm like, no. So if I did find out, I don't remember when I did this. If you go to youtube.com/David, not Dave, David Jackson, that's my YouTube channel. So it's it was fun, but I had to do the first time I was really just like, really? Because I said, you asked me, like I'm your guest. This is how you treat your guests. Because it was literally like, hey, come on in, get to work. Oh, that was the other one. What's the topic and what's the description? And I'm like, it's your audience. You tell me, what are you bringing me on for? I was just like, it's crazy. So anyway, so have fun with that. Gary says that video was hilarious. And I went to their site and they are clueless. Well, I don't think I showed their site. I just showed their form. Because I was really trying to keep them out of it.
I know.
I didn't.
Maybe you did.
Oopsie. So
it could have been in the URL in the YouTube sleuths found it. They can find anything. They're going to stop the video and zoom in on the URL, and I'll save a funny YouTube story for the post show. How's that?
Excellent. Well, speaking of the post show, man, that went ridiculously fast.
Always does.
What is coming up on the averageguy.tv?
Yeah, so my daughter Sammy came on last night, our second annual Friday after Thanksgiving Home Gadget Geeks. We talked a little bit about her in a college newsroom during a major election. That was kind of cool. And then look, she's a senior, so she's going to graduate this year or next year and has to get a real job. So we talked a little bit about what's it like to look for a real job during the pandemic. And so that'll be posted a little bit later this weekend over at the averageguy.tv.
That's a great question because now you've got to figure out your background.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be as simple as write in black ink instead of blue to stand out. And how do you, it's got to be interesting. Well, on the School of Podcasting, I'm such a Beatles nut. Abbey Road, the second side of Abbey Road is a bunch of ideas that they just smush together. So I'm going to kind of do that this week. One of the things is your podcast future proof? Because I had a client of mine that wanted me to go back and edit a bunch of their old episodes. And so we're going to talk about what happens when your content becomes outdated and how can you avoid doing that. So that'll be on the schoolofpodcasting.com. I want to say thanks again to the awesome 32 people watching in the chat room. We are here every Saturday morning. askthepodcastcoach.com/live, and stick around for some post show because Jim has got a YouTube story coming up. And we're back. So you have a YouTube story.
I do. Hold on. We need more coffee.
Oh, all right.
Can we start with
Cappuccino, hold the phone.
This makes me so happy. Okay. So if you don't think you're being watched on YouTube, so there's a YouTuber that I watch. And he's a homesteading DIY kind of guy, always, showing what he's doing. So a year ago, he built this, they built the house first and then he's building this garage and doing some other stuff. I just find it fascinating. He has a listener say to him, sends him a note in a year and some change later and says, "Hey, I think you covered up a wall outlet when you put in this wall." And he was like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure you'd put in an outlet and you covered it up." So he goes to the spot, runs where the listener told him the outlet was. He went to that spot, cut into the wall, and sure enough, he had covered up an outlet when he put that wall up. Now, how crazy do you have to be to watch the videos that carefully that you notice, this is video and the guy's never even been there, that to notice that the guy with drywall covered up, and he doesn't show everything,
right?
Covered up the outlet. And I was thinking, if you the internet sleuths that are out there, that
they catch everything.
Oh my gosh. So if you think you're doing YouTube videos and people are not noticing what's in the background or what you're doing or what you're saying, they're going to remember, they're going to call you on it, those kinds of things. That was, and I've kind of known, I kind of know this thing going in, but I was like, oh my God, somebody was watching that carefully. So if you're going to do that kind of stuff on YouTube, if you're going to do how this goes, you better have thick skin and be able to get everything exactly right, or be able, even if you get it exactly right, you're just going to get hammered, by the internet or by YouTube folks. So I think you have to have thick skin if you're going to go into that space. Yeah.
Absolutely. I have found, in fact, I'm trying to figure it out as we speak. Let me see if I can get data on one here real quick. I've been using Logitech's kind of built-in free video tool, and it's actually pretty cool because you just hit go and you can switch between screens and you can have words come up on the screen and things like that. And I'm trying to see what their audio codec is. It's variable. All right. That's not great. Because if you do audio microphone shootouts and your audio is not pristine, you will hear about it in the comments. People are like, there's artifacts in this. And I'm like, it's pretty much what it is. I didn't have any effects on. So I now realize if I'm going to do any kind of microphone shootout, I almost need to link to the WAV file for these people to be happy. But also I need to go back to Camtasia, which it's not that hard. In fact, the new version, it used to drive me nuts. The version I had, 2019, they wouldn't let the camera go widescreen. I had to go in and it was a hassle. They have since fixed that. But I love the fact that when I was done with, it's called Logi, the Logitech software. When I was done, if I didn't make any mistakes, it was done. And with Camtasia, I can do a perfect take, and now I got to render it, and that at times can take forever. So, what are you going to do? But
I am surprised the clock on this computer is off. Like it's an old computer, and I can't I can't actually set, and it's kind of blurry. You can't kind of see it, but it's actually been for weeks. It's been off. Like, and I kind of leave it just to kind of see if anyone
wait to see who's going to catch it.
Going to notice it. I did try to fix it, and I can't. It's something went. It's an old Surface RT from Microsoft. It's not even supported anymore, and I'm surprised it even works. But I tried to go in. I can't change the year back. The problem is it's 2027 or something on the computer. And well, of course, that's not the year. I should probably try to figure out which year is the same as now and change it to it. But and then I had to reset up some wireless stuff. Normally, I have a Chromecast here playing, and I had to reconfigure my wireless network here. Which, by the way, in today's world of IoT, when you have your lights and these wonderful digital assistants and stuff, if you have to change your SSID on your Wi-Fi, which I did, I wanted to clean some things up. Right. Everything goes down. None of the lights work, none of the devices work. You have to go and reset them up. They're all different. It's a ton of work.
On my list of things to do today is to wipe out all of my reminders on the woman in the tube, because I somehow made a setting to not announce those in my office because, I might be recording a podcast. The problem is I'm always in my office. So I'll be sitting here and I'll have a reminder go off in my bedroom that I need to hear, and I can't. And I'm like, oh, that's dumb. And the other thing with that one that I thought was so stupid is each device has its own address. And I'm like, it's in the house. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not going to have one in Akron and then my other one's in Cuyahoga Falls. I'm like, no, it doesn't work that way. So when I would ask the living room,
but you might, I mean, you could have one.
Yeah.
Say you had a lake house.
But I think they should have, like, I don't know. There was just a way I was like, because I would ask the living room and it'd be like, the weather in Cuyahoga Falls. I'm like, I'm not in Cuyahoga Falls anymore. And I was like, so I had to go into every puck, everything I had, and change the address. And I was like, ugh. So that was one that
it's a nightmare.
Yeah,
it's a nightmare. I had to factory reset my wireless router here, and last weekend I had some trouble, and I literally spent all day Sunday reattaching my Internet of Things devices, my lights, these things, because they each have a different app. Because I'm a tech guy, I buy different kinds of things to test them out.
Oh yeah,
right. And by the end of the day Sunday, I was like, I need to throw all of these out and just buy, multiple versions of the same thing. Because I have 3 different kinds of cameras. I have 3 different kinds of wall plugs. I have 3 different kinds of lights.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah,
I'm
you're going into the app and changing those.
The other thing we need is, I don't think I have one sitting here. I bought these. It's basically an extension cord that's about 6 inches long. And I bought those because if you have a wall plug and you want to stick 2, like, not happening. So I have all these stupid cables sticking out of the wall so I can stick in my smart plug to tell it to turn on the Christmas tree. It's like,
don't ask me why I have this available, but there it is.
That's it.
These are helpple. These are really helpful.
They're super handy, and you can buy like a 6-pack for not that much. But yeah, that's exactly all my, and then I have one. I finally found a power strip, because I have 2 plugs going to my tree. One's for the tree and one's for the star. And I was like, how am I going to turn on the tree with one command? I'm like, I'll put them into a power strip, and then the power strip into the, that whole thing. So Dave says, we play a game in our house. We have a conversation near our phones and see how long it takes the items in our conversation to show up in our ad and news streams. Wait, what? Huh?
Hey, go into your A Lady app, and there's a section, go to settings, and then I think there's some voice command things, and you can, to help it recognize voices better. Yeah. You can go and listen to some of the things it's been recording.
Oh,
I did that last night, and I was like, ooh, this is kind of spooky. Like, it's really listening a lot. Now it only plays back the commands. In theory, it's only supposed to be listening to commands that you record. But I've said you can whisper to her, and she'll whisper back.
That's creepy. I've done that.
And so some of those recordings were me whispering, and you're like, oh, that sounds that sounds awful. So if you really want to freak yourself out, go in and do some voice training on that thing, because it's going to say, is this you? In this case, it's Sarah and I.
Right.
It's trying to differentiate between the two. And so you go listen to those and you're like, because the new Sidewalk is getting ready to launch on those Amazon devices.
I've heard that.
Right. And there's a lot of controversy over whether you leave it enabled or disabled. It's on by default.
Explain what Sidewalk is for somebody.
Basically, Sidewalk is like mesh networking for your neighborhood. So everybody that has one of these devices, if you turn it on, they'll begin to connect to each other. That'll help you extend. So your Wi-Fi would then extend to your neighbor's house. So that Amazon is saying it's in a different frequency and it's low bandwidth and those kinds of things, right? It's really designed for things like your cameras, your outdoor cameras, in dog collars and some of those kind of things to extend your ability outside of your house. But man, it's created a lot of controversy in that. And it's on, by the way, it's on by default. So if you don't want to do that right away, I went in and turned it off. And I'm usually a pretty open guy, but I was like, I think I'm going to wait for this one to a little water go under the bridge before I let this thing happen.
There's a thing in Akron where they were going to give away free video doorbells to people. And oh, by the way, the police might occasionally use that camera if we need to, go in and get, try to identify somebody.
Right.
And there was a lot of pushback on that. They're like, hey, we'd love the free doorbell, but So, and then Dave's got a question. Has anyone ever had issues streaming apps like StreamYard over a VPN?
Oh.
I've never used a VPN.
Yeah,
I know what they are.
And I use a VPN on my phone from time to time, but I wouldn't necessarily. I have to try that. I have to try it. I haven't.
Yeah. Did Comcast try this Sidewalk thingy?
Okay, well, let's be really clear. A lot of the ISPs, if you purchase the modem, the wireless routers from them, they're doing this already.
Yeah.
So that's Cox Communications, which is here in the Omaha area. They not only are serving you Wi-Fi, but they're also creating a Cox open Wi-Fi that people can connect to, and it's going through you're not charged for the bandwidth, right? It's a separate kind of channel thing, but they're going through your thing. So some of them are doing this. They didn't try, they're doing.
Yeah. They didn't really ask for permission.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, it's on unless you turn it off. It's
if you open your phone and you go to you go to the settings and you go to Wi-Fi, if you see your service provider's like hotspot, it's probably you. You are probably the hotspot. So you might want to check that out. Hard to turn those off too.
Fun.
You have to basically not use their router, by your own.
Lucky.
Yeah.
Here's we're gonna take a hard left and change topics here.
This was so much fun though. Doom and gloom.
Have you ever noticed if there's a website service that's better for SEO? So Wix, Weebly, Squarespace. I just know, I think they have fixed this. When Squarespace first came out, they would have the title, but it didn't behind the scenes have the H1 tag on it, which is what triggers Google that, hey, these words are very important. It's our title. I think they fixed that. That was years ago. I don't know that as long as you are able to go and have a title and subtitles and things like that, the H1s, the H2s, the H3s, and you write that people will read it. I don't know that it really matters. I don't know. Jim, any insights on that?
No, I don't. This is this SEO area I'm not particularly good at.
Yeah, that's for Black Friday. I bought myself access to Neil Patel, who's this SEO guru. I bought his course. And what's great about this, there's actually a part of my brain that thinks I'm actually going to watch it. I should, because I paid money for it. But I'm kind of like, oh, look at this, and it's such a good deal. And it's
what's blocking you, Dave? What's the fear that's blocking you?
No, it's not that. It's just focus, basically. I started to watch some of the podcast movement stuff and was kind of like, meh. That's another one I was surprised, people not using microphones. I was like, really? Podcasters are not going to use, really?
Yeah, why would you do that?
One person I will give credit. They were using a Yeti off camera, and actually it must have been right there. Because I'm like, that's weird. There's no microphone, but you don't sound that bad. And then I noticed she moved, and I noticed like in the very, very bottom of her screen, I was like, oh wait, that's the top of a Yeti. So
SEO has a lot of camps. I'm noticing like, oh no, SEO, you should be doing this, or SEO, you should be doing that.
Yeah.
And then you're like, but those contradict. I know. Like, well, what do I do?
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
He says it does help to recommend things like tagging images, with alt descriptions, some
Well,
rushes.
that's a good human thing to do. Like, because people
Oh,
who
yeah.
can't, people who
Can't
can't
see.
see the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't do enough of that myself, to be honest.
No, that's one of the things that, well, the whatever it is, Yoast SEO plugin is pretty good at reminding you to do things like that. The other thing, while we're here, this is just a nice thing to do. We were talking, I think it was last week, about Podchaser and how we need to do more with it. So I was over there playing this morning. If you go to podchaser.com/integrations and feel so moved, vote up my podcast reviews from our buddy Daniel J. Lewis is over there. And there are other things. There are a lot of things over there I've never heard of. And I still don't get Podlink. There's another one of those, use our link to make a link to about your stuff. I'm like, how about if I just link to my website? What else do we have? Here is it was an interesting article. If your audience is on Twitter, and it was basically marketing for sports podcasters. And he pointed out that, and I've started doing this. I don't know if it's going to work or not, but I have my show artwork, and I'll like the title. In fact, let me find it. I'm playing basically, and I'm like, I don't know if this is going to be better or worse, but it'd be interesting. And I figure it's another way to maybe get somebody to click on it. My episode title for last week, where I was talking about Quibi, the episode title was "You Can't Buy an Audience If Your Podcast Sucks." That was the actual title in WordPress, but the title on my image said "How to Avoid a $1.7 billion Mistake: Lessons from Quibi." So I'm kind of like, if you can't pick which title to use, I'm going to use two. So between the two, and I was like, like I'm going to try that. Maybe if I hit them with two different titles, they'll click play. So, Coach Dave says I've used my podcast reviews from DJL for years. It does what it says it does.
You know what I discovered about reviews?
What?
If you don't ask for them, you don't get them.
Not a lot.
Zero. I don't think I've had a review in 4 years.
Well, here's the thing that I like about that, though, because I get I get more on podcast rodeo show, and it's usually disgruntled people. Like, how dare you say my show is, you hack. But when you do get a review, then it's kind of cool because you didn't ask for it.
Yeah.
You're like, hey, this is somebody who really, thought it'd be cool to do that. But yeah, I'm with you though. If you don't ask, you don't get. So
no, you have to ask. I don't think people would just normally do it for the most part. You may every once in a while get an anomaly, but if you want them, if they're a big deal to you, I think you got to ask for them.
Yeah. It was funny. I was making some tutorials. If you want to learn Podpage, speaking of sites that went down with AWS, if you go to schoolofpodcasting.com/learn Podpage, I just updated all the videos last night, and that was fun because that guy is constantly adding new features. So making videos for that was fun. But I was using, I moved the website Best Podcasting Gear over there. And that's when I realized that all that content was so outdated because I was talking about mixers and, the PR. It's funny. I don't know that we still kind of talk about, I don't have my jingle set up, but the Heil PR40, that really doesn't get mentioned, at least for me. Like that wouldn't be in my top 5. I'd be like, okay, RE320, maybe I like the, I think it's the Rodecaster from Rode. That I thought that I like the Audio Technica BP40 is a pretty cool mic. There's a bunch of them, but unless you really want that deep bassy thing, I'm like, but I was just amazed at how much of it was just way, way outdated. And getting back to reviews, I went to show the feature where you can pick what reviews you want to show on your website. And I didn't have a single one. And I was like, oh yeah, we'll have to switch to a different show to show that feature. Because they have that whole thing where you can have, you can go in your reviews and say, put these on the front page. and then you could have a link to rate and review the show. And I was like, I'm with you. I'm like, it's not, I mean, I like them when I get them, but it's not a high priority for me. I cringe every time I hear somebody say, please rate and review the show. It helps us get found and it helps us in the rankings. I'm just like, no, it doesn't. It doesn't.
It helps some ego though. And so I don't poo-poo it. I mean, if you want to ask for them and they're important to you, get them, ask for them and get them, build them up. If that's something you can use for a social proof, great. I mean, if they help you, use them. I don't think there's any reason not to get them. They may not do what you think they do, but that's debatable.
Yeah, the time I've seen them really work, I had somebody that said they were trying to get a sponsor and they got the sponsor because the sponsor saw how many reviews they had. And I was like, well, there you go. A podcast I was listening to asked for Stitcher reviews, Bang says, and I went through the pain of making one. Their second review, but I was hate listening. There you go. So that guy moved you to write a review.
Oh, hate listening. I like that. I like that phrase.
No. So do reviews really work? They do not help you get found. They do not help you in the rankings. No, they are social proof. And that key point here, asterisk, may help you if somebody's looking at two podcasts and one has 146 and one has 12. They may go to the 146 one because it shows that your audience is a little more engaged. But in reviews, we threw it in the show notes a couple weeks ago. Paul Culligan has a guy that's number 5 in health, which is a pretty competitive, category. And the guy's number 5 and had 0 reviews. And like, he was higher than people with, hundreds of reviews. It's just one of those things that gets repeated so often that people think it's true. And it's just not. So Dave says, reviews help me feel grateful to my audience. Yeah. Also make me want to give them a shout out in the next episode. Yep. Yeah. I always just do that at the end because reviews do nothing for your audience. If I say, hey, Jim Mom 37 said, thanks for the show. Dave's great. Okay. That's good for me. Not so much good for my audience, but that's just one of those things I call an opinion.
GYM mom, that kind of Jim Mom.
Yeah.
It's weird the other way.
Yeah. Whitney Johnson reads some recent reviews near the end of her episode. Sometimes it helps get more reviews. Yep. Yeah. That's my whole thing. Am I giving for me? And again, it's just an opinion. Just do those at the end. I wouldn't open up with that. I had a guy on YouTube that did that. And I said, hey, for the record, because he said, I'm going to read these reviews, please. And he begged his audience, write reviews. He goes, it really helps me get found. I said, hey, for the record, it doesn't. Just, for the record, I'm quoting Rob Walsh and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, well, I talked to someone at Apple. And I'm like, okay, whatever. So, maybe he did.
The YouTube culture is pretty good about this, though. Especially with Patreon, I watch a lot of YouTubers who are really good at giving shout outs to their Patreon folks in the videos, not necessarily a section like we do, but a section where they talk about it. But in the video, and I think those are actually beneficial. Now, they're beneficial, maybe not from a systematic perspective, but I think from a cultural perspective, they're really good. And so I think that's things to do that helps build, and this is kind of what they're saying in the chat room, kind of help build podcast culture and community. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Kim brings up a good point. He talked to someone at Apple. Yeah. Well, if you're at an event, you can. I've talked to people from Apple, but they won't say anything on the record. What does help you get found, Dave? If reviews are not a factor, is it a number of downloads, velocity? You guessed it's subscribers and total number of downloads.
We're talking about iTunes.
iTunes, yeah,
in particular, right?
Yeah.
Because no, we don't know what Stitcher does. We don't know what Spotify does. We don't know, some of those kinds of things.
And then the other thing is, content. I'm trying to think of the last podcast I shared. It's been a while since I've was like, wow, this is great. I got to share it.
Yeah. Be interesting to somebody.
Yeah. That's the big one. Yeah. Craig has a great point. He says, I'd rather get one piece of show feedback than 10 reviews. Yep. That's you. Because that way I can start a conversation with someone. So yeah. And it's news. Well, there's new subscribers within a X amount of period and then total number of subscribers. And is it, new subscribers within a certain amount of period and then total number of downloads, I think I'd have to go back and watch the presentation from Rob, but And then of course, then that always brings up the question of, does that really help? I mean, Libsyn had a podcast on the front page of iTunes, not in the category. Open up iTunes, right there. We got a couple hundred downloads. And I was like, because I really expected thousands of people just going, what's this? Yeah. And it was called Thanks Podcasting. Maybe that was it. Maybe it didn't really grab people, and it was, a podcast about podcasting. But when I heard, I was like, how many? And they're like, yeah, a couple hundred. And I was like, wow. So, so having a hub on your show with links to all the platforms in addition to iTunes makes sense. Here's why. Now, for me, I like to have Apple, Spotify, Google, and Amazon. Those are probably the top 4. And then it's like, if maybe I'll have those in the episode, and then I'll have a link to subscribe where I got everything. Because if I hit them with 37, they're going to like, I don't know what to do. But it does, because how this is going to work. And somebody did this week. That was, did I put that snarky video out? Maybe not. A podcast consultant said, hey, he was in Podcast Movement. He's like, hey, my new podcast is out. It's a podcast about podcasting, which I kind of was like, isn't that self-promotion? And I went to get it in Overcast, and he was excited because he was in Apple. Well, it takes a while for all these apps that pull from the back end of Apple to get it. And I was like, ooh, you just, here's a phrase that I want to know the origins of. We need Emily to bring back the story behind. Where did the phrase screwed the pooch come from? It's the weirdest phrase. Cause I'm like, man, that guy screwed the pooch. And I was like, cause I'm not going to, what I did was I ended up going and getting his RSS feed from Apple, which is not easy. You can't do that on a Mac. And then slacked that RSS feed to my phone, where I copied it and pasted it into Overcast. I'm like, nobody's doing that. So that was one that I was like, egads.
I don't know if you want to ever use that phrase again.
Oh, okay. I also don't think you want to Google that phrase, especially Google Images. That would be bad. Not good. Okay.
Yeah. No, it's not a good.
Okay.
I think it's a tamer version. It's like using frack or frickin' kind of thing instead. Yeah. So
Dave says he knocks on doors and talks about a show all the time on the sidelines of games, and asks for a phone and subscribe. Yeah, that's another one. I always kind of make a joke out of it, but I'm not joking. And if I'm on a stage and it's appropriate, I will say, hey, everybody, say, hey, Siri, subscribe to the School of Podcasting. And then my phone just lit up. So
mine didn't. Well, it's because it can't hear you.
Yeah. But anyway.
Now I'm traumatized.
Yeah.
Reading about that phrase.
But yeah, that was one. I don't think I put that out because it was kind of like, I want to play nice. And I think that was when I was like, look, if you can't say anything nice, just there's a guy that's doing a podcast about podcasting on Spotify only, which technically is not a podcast, which I thought was interesting. It comes from NASA.
Well, that's a team article on it.
Yeah.
I think they're trying to I think if you go back a little bit farther on its origins, it's a little scary.
Yeah. I have a sticker on my back window. My license plate says podcast. So when I lived in the apartment, they're like, oh, you're the podcast dude. And I was like, yep. Oh, here's another tip. And I was amazed at this. How are we doing on time? Okay. When I had the P4 shipped, it said Dave Jackson, care of School of Podcasting. And I've had 2 drivers now drop off something. And this one I said I have to sign for it. I didn't want to, nobody's going to steal it, but I didn't want it to go. So these are drivers who are bored out of their gourd driving around. And the one guy, I had a shirt that said, ask me about my podcast. And so he hands me my package and then says, oh, what's your podcast about? And I go, School of Podcasting. And I think I told you that story. That was the guy that heard me on the radio. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then he went on to talk about how he loves listening to podcasts. And so this guy drops this off and he goes, oh, School of Podcasting. He goes, what's your podcast? I go, well, that's it. It's School of Podcasting. I teach people how to podcast. And this guy went on I'm going to say 5 to 10 minutes. I'm freezing to death. It's 42 degrees outside. I have no coat on. And he's telling me how much he's learned about science from podcasts. And he's like, and I'm talking about this like it's not, I think it was Wednesday, like it's not a holiday system, but he just went on and on about how much he loved podcasts. So, and I was like, man, if we can get delivery drivers to talk about our show, they know other delivery drivers, and that would be a way to do that. But I was surprised that just by putting podcasting on my address, that guy was like, huh. So anyway, but I was surprised, but I just thought about that. I'm like, well, there are, if you could find truck drivers or delivery guys or people that are really bored at work and can listen to podcasts. So
yeah, but large scale, I mean, if you're going to get exponential growth, you got to get it out. I mean, it's got to kind of catch some kind of something somewhere to get that. Most people are never going to see that kind of growth.
Right.
You're just not,
little by little, baby steps. So awesome. Well, another Saturday has come upon us.
Yeah, it's come and gone. It's always good it's good to connect. I think Christmas time now, I think we can officially kind of sponsor Christmas, right? We can kind of say those kinds of things coming up, right? We're beyond the Thanksgiving holiday. There's a debate, right? Can you, in the United States, can you start getting ready for Christmas before Thanksgiving? Is that even allowed?
And it didn't used to be. No. I did, because my brother always ends up, I think like we might actually have Christmas on the 14th, I heard, because he's going to go to Florida, I think. Here's the weird thing. His mother-in-law just got done with all sorts of chemo treatments. And so she's in a somewhat, I
need to get my copy some meds.
and so she's in a already reduced health state. And then he's afraid to see his grandkids because they keep sending the kids to school and then they send them home to quarantine. And he's like, so the last thing I want to do is actually pick up some COVID, take it to Florida and give it to my mother-in-law. Right. So it's this weird thing. Like, we might actually not do Christmas. He goes, I'll probably have you over because you don't see anybody. He goes, I don't think we're going to do the whole grandkids, everybody over big house. Plus there's you can only have 6 people in Ohio. That was a fun thing. Thanksgiving, I'm hanging out with my brother and we're getting ready we were going to watch a holiday movie. And then my sister's like, wait, that's not going to be over before 10. He goes, you got to be home before 10.
Oh, that's right. You guys have a curfew now.
And they raised it up. If you get busted, it's a pretty hefty fine. So I was like, well, I guess I'm going home.
So are the streets just empty at night then? After
I don't
10?
know. I need to go look. So
that's early in the pandemic. That was weird. It's really slowed people down. But we got some work to do. December will be interesting. Hopefully we can flatten the curve a little bit through December. So, all right, friend.
All right. We'll see y'all next Saturday.
You bet. Take care. We'll see you guys.
We'll see you. Take care. Bye-bye.